Public comment, we have none. 4, policy issues, discussion and potential committee determination, none. 5, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. Consideration of resolution expressing support for Wisconsin SB 877 and AB 940 to address recent loss of federal funding. I'll turn it over to Lance. This arose because of the CJCC meeting the other day and some lack of funding. And we wanted to get on here, and that's why we call this quick meeting, because the legislature is going to be meeting before our next county board meeting. So that's the reason we're bringing this up now and why we had to call a special meeting. With that, I'll turn it over to Administrator Leonard, and he can kind of go through what they discussed.
Thank you, Chair Boots. I will do my best to convey the information that was discussed at the CJCC. This issue was brought up by Jane Graham Jennings from the women's community initially, and both the women's community and our local child advocacy center representative provided the information that ultimately caused the CJCC to make a motion to support the county board expressing through resolution support for both the Senate bill and Assembly bill that are referenced in the agenda. Succinctly put, I'll start with kind of, and the information in the packet does summarize kind of the reasons underlying the request that, or the recommendation rather, of the CJCC. But at the federal level, the Victims of Crime Act takes in funds through the prosecution of federal criminal actions, and those funds provide funding for a wide variety of activities that serve to support victims of crime at the local level. Those dollars are essentially passed through the state, and you'll see on what is page 5 of the packet that kind of the situation that arose is that the funding level, the monies coming in, have continued to decrease based on a number of factors, but at least what was referenced in the presentation was a change in prosecution strategy at the federal level, or approach to prosecution at the federal level. So historically, the state of Wisconsin is in the area of approximately $44.5 million in VOCA, or Victims of Crime Act funding. And moving forward, the reduction, it's going to be reduced to 13 to 15 million. So a very significant $30 million reduction. Now, what those funds go to provide as it relates to, I'll start with the Child Advocacy Center. Our local Northern Wisconsin Child Advocacy Center serves a great number of counties, and certainly for Marathon County, they provide a lot of services. But when you look at their funding reduction, it's quite significant as laid out in the attachments. But those dollars also go to the women's community. The women's community receives approximately $484,000, has historically received approximately $484,000. The funding that they are anticipating, the maximum they could anticipate, is through a competitive cycle would be reduced to $250,000. So you essentially, best case scenario, a reduction of about $234,000 in their federal funding. And that stream of funding provides support for the women's community for about 14 staff positions. Now, of course, the women's community has a wide variety of other funding, but ultimately, Jane, from the women's community, Jane Graham Jennings, their executive director, shared that without additional state funds, there is the potential kind of ripple effect here that they may have to make changes or, in fact, close their shelter program. So you'll see from the presentation that the story at the federal level, that funding is going to be reduced in the interim. However, there was an approach that the federal government did take in 2021. There was the VOCA Fix to Sustain the Crime Victims Fund Act of 2021, and that was essentially aimed at increasing the dollars coming into that fund that could then later be passed through to the state. However, what that leaves is kind of an interim period where that funding is going to be significantly reduced. And I referenced that before for the state of Wisconsin, the reduction from over $40 million to between 13 and 15 million. When you look at where Marathon County organizations receiving VOCA funding, where those exist, even in our district attorney's office, we receive some VOCA funding. Approximately $14,000 is what was reported during the meeting. The Wausau Police Department receives about $300,000 that goes to fund therapists for their victims response unit. Judicare gets approximately $293,000 for some victim rights community work that they do. And then I already referenced the women's community. A local counseling agency, Peaceful Solutions, has also gotten some funding historically. However, they're in the process of merging with Bridge Clinic, so it's difficult to ascertain, and it wasn't referenced in our meeting what their ultimate impact was going to be. But certainly through the Child Advocacy Center and the women's community, that's a pretty substantial impact, as well as the Wausau Police Department and Judicare. So essentially, this problem has been known about for some time, and you'll see the Senate bill and the Assembly bill that were referenced. They appear to have, I would say, relatively broad bipartisan support, both in the Senate and in the Assembly. And what the state of Wisconsin, through those bills, is proposing to do, the authors are proposing to do, is fill that interim funding gap with allocations of state funding. So the discussion at the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, Kyle is here from the District Attorney's Office, and if Kyle grabs a microphone, he can elaborate on anything. But the Child Advocacy Center is very, I think this group is well informed relative to the work of the women's community, but you may not be familiar with the Child Advocacy Center. It really serves as a point where child victims of crime or child witnesses to crime can be interviewed in a way that is more conducive to receiving helpful information, less stressful, I guess I would say more trauma-informed than what you might traditionally understand through a law enforcement investigation. Individuals at the Child Advocacy Center are trained in conducting those child interviews, and they conduct them in kind of more like a living room setting where kids are able to sit down in a comfortable place and have those conversations. And why that's important is because the state of Wisconsin evidence rules with respect to both criminal actions as well as child protection cases allow for those interviews to be used more broadly than perhaps statements to non-law enforcement personnel would otherwise be used. So it's very helpful for prosecutors in our DA's office, very helpful to our social services department, and certainly helpful to children and families. And the other thing I would say about our Child Advocacy Center is that they do a very good job of working very closely with our local law enforcement and our district attorney's office. The representative from the local Child Advocacy Center shared that she previously worked at another advocacy center, and that relationship with the district attorney's office was not as robust. So we very frequently have prosecutors actually attend those interviews and observe them through a closed circuit television sort of a setup where they can provide feedback on additional information that they would need for purposes of prosecution, and law enforcement as well for purposes of investigation. So the discussion at the CJCC ultimately resulted in a motion to have this committee and ultimately the county board consider whether it thought it was appropriate to author or sign a resolution expressing support for these two bills, the Senate bill and the Assembly bill. And as was referenced by Chair Boots, the reason for kind of fast tracking this is that the legislature does not have very many session days left before the election cycle, and certainly the representatives and certain senators may be busy doing other things during that time. So that's kind of the background. I don't know, Kyle, if I missed anything substantial, or just if you have anything else to add, or anyone else who was at the CJCC meeting that wishes to add. The final thing I'll say is that the recommendation was unanimous out of the CJCC.
The only other thing I'll say is with individuals who are on probation, when they are being revoked, they have a right to a revocation hearing. and the CAC interviews can be used at those revocation hearings so that the child doesn't have to testify in that setting. That's really helpful, A, because just subjecting a child to cross-examination is not easy for that child, but also at the revocation hearing, the probation E, so the person that's being revoked, gets a defense counsel, a lawyer that is a defense attorney. The state, the probation agent, is the one that conducts that hearing. It's not a lawyer for the state that is conducting those hearings. So without having the CAC interviews and having that child subjected to that testimony, they're able to ask questions that may not ordinarily be allowed to get in because those probation agents aren't trained lawyers. They don't know when to object as much as someone that's a trained lawyer. So it really does help to stop those children from having to testify and being subjected to that cross-examination at probation hearings.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the only other thing that I would add is the scope of which, so the Child Advocacy Center of North Central Wisconsin, which serves Marathon County and some also additional counties, there's 15 in the state, served last year in 2023, 355 children, of which over 200 were from Marathon County alone. So you can just get a sense of the scope of which they have impact on doing what is in the best interest of the children long term. So, thank you.
All right, with that, I'll open it up to the floor to public safety. Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to forward Resolution R324 to endorse the 2023 Wisconsin State Senate Bill 877 and 2023 Wisconsin Assembly Bill 940 to the full board.
Motion on the table. Do I have a second? We have a second. Any further discussion? All right. With that, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Motion carried. Thank you, everyone. That was quick and painless. Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your schedule for this meeting. I know it's hard sometimes midday like this, so. With that, I will take 8.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made. We have a second. Motion made second. All in favor? All right. Motion carried. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, everyone.